respected guest, esteemed speaker, and dear audiences. A very warm welcome to all of you at the 6th Economics Conclave 2025, organized by the School of Economics, University of Hyderabad. I am Sonia Das, anchor of today's event.
And I am Shruti, co-anchor of this session, and we are more than delighted to guide you through this enriching session on India's macro challenge, generating and financing a big investment push.
Now I would like to introduce our distinct dignitaries on the dais. We have with us the chief guest of the event, Shri Suman Berry sir. He is the Honorable Vice Chairman of NITI Aayog, and Suman Berry sir is an Indian economist, academic, and a writer. He served as a former Director General of the National Council for Applied Economic Research and the former Indian Country Director of International Growth Center, and he also served as the World Bank for 28 years. And we also have with us the guest of honor, Professor B.J. Rao sir, Vice Chancellor of University of Hyderabad, Professor Devasys Acharya sir, Dean of the School of Economics, University of Hyderabad, and Dr. Krishna Reddy Chittedi sir, Faculty Coordinator of the Economic Conclave. And we also have with us Jay Jaiswal Bhaiya, who is the current PhD board member, and Akashlina D, who is a PhD scholar at School of Economics.
Yeah. Please, all esteemed dignitaries, please come and sit.
Now I would like to invite the esteemed dignitaries to come forward for the lamp lighting ceremony. Now I would like to call Srinidhi, students of economics, I am a second year, for Saraswati Vandana.
वीणावादिनि वरदे वीणावादिनि वरदे 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 वीणावादिनि वरदे काठ अंध उर के बंधन स्तर महाजननि ज्योतिर्मयि निर्झर कलुष भेद तम हर प्रकार हर जगमग जग कर दे वीणावादिनि वरदे 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 वीणावादिनि वरदे नवगति नवलय तालचंद नव नवलकंठ नव जलधि मंद्र रव नव नभ के नव विहग वृंद को नव स्वर दे वीणावादिनि वरदे 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 वीणावादिनि वरदे 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 Thank you.
Thank you, Srinidhi. Thank you very much for this beautiful Saraswati Vandana. Now I would like to request Krishna Reddy sir to speak few lines. He is the faculty coordinator of Economic Conclave and address the floor.
So very good evening to all of you, the dignitaries on the dais, Sri Shuman Beliji and our Honorable Vice Chancellor, the respected Dean, and my student friends and colleagues, students, friends. It's a very honor and pleasure today to the 6th Economic Conclave to have our Honorable Vice Chairman of NITI Aayog to address all of us, to guide us, to lead how we can plan our career and how we can contribute to our nation. So this is the 6th Economics Conclave. As we all know, this is a student-led initiative. Every year students themselves organize this event and this year theme is also very contemporary relevance with a macro. So we have invited also few outside students so that they also present the technical sessions, the presentations, and we have different kinds of pedagogy, that is in terms of learning with kind of mock games to different kinds of ways of new innovative plans for the session, and also we invited certain industry and academia to interact. So this is a 2 days conclave as a vibrant forum for an intellectual feast for all of us. So with this I'm happy on behalf of the entire organizing team of the 6th Economics Conclave. I once again welcome all of you and thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you.
So now it's time to hear our eminent speaker. I invite Sri Suman Berry sir, our chief guest, to deliver the keynote. To deliver the keynote lecture by Sri Suman Berry sir, Vice Chairman, NITI Aayog, Government of India. Okay, welcome address. Okay. Sorry for the inconvenience. So I would like to call our Dean sir, Devasis Acharya sir, to give us a welcome address.
A pleasant afternoon, everybody. Today we are privileged to have Sri Suman Beri, Vice Chairman, NITI Aayog, who humbly accepted our invitation at such a short notice to deliver the keynote address, the keynote lecture. Welcome, sir. Please join me in welcoming our beloved Vice Chancellor, Professor B.J. Rao. To the 6th Economic Conclave 2025, a student's initiative, as chair of this session. Professor B.J. Rao is a distinguished scientist. Presently, he is Sir J.C. Bose awardee and a fellow of all 3 National Science Academies. The theme of this year's conclave is Shocks, Shifts, and Strategies Mapping India's Macroeconomic Future. Dear students, as you know, NITI Aayog has been playing a pivotal role in developing strategic and long-term policy frameworks for inclusive growth in India and in India's journey towards a Vikasit Bharat. Sir, our chief guest, we at the School of Economics impart a balanced training across all our programs, Masters in Economics, Masters in Financial Economics, and a 5-year Masters Integrated Program in Economics, and also our PhD program, in the true heterodox tradition that includes theory, quantitative methods, and political economy. We are glad to have our alumni and graduates contributing in their own ways to industry, academia, civil service, and the society at large. Some of them are part of NITI Aayog as well. For instance, Sir Dr. Prabhakar Sahu, who is our alumnus, prepared the Fiscal Health Index report, which was published by NITI Aayog, and the report was received well by all stakeholders in the country. Our students have also worked as young professionals and interns in the past few years in the Aayog. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming again our chief guest, Sri Suman Beri, with a huge round of applause. Thank you.
So it's time to invite our chief guest, Sri Suman Beri sir, who is the Honorable Vice Chairman of NITI Aayog, to address a keynote lecture on India's macro challenges, generating and financing a big investment push. Sir, please come, sir. Welcome, sir.
It's not on here, is it? No. Okay. Is the PPT here? Okay. Okay, I'll have to look back, is it? Okay. Slideshow, please. Professor B.J. Rao, Vice Chancellor, University of Hyderabad. Professor Devashish Acharya, Dean. SoE is School of Economics, University of Hyderabad. Dr. Krishnadari Chetterjee, Faculty Coordinator. The student coordinators who have put all this together. Jay Jaiswal, Akash Leena. Students, friends, let me start by saying why I was very pleased to accept this invitation. So, as you know, the Vice Chairman of NITI Aayog, like the predecessor Deputy Chairman of the Planning Commission, this is a position which reports directly to the Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji. I was privileged to be selected for this in May of 2022, and it is in August of 2022 when, as COVID was vanquished, the Prime Minister on August the 15th put forward the vision of a Viksit Bharat. At that time, we were celebrating the 75th year of India's independence, and that meant that there were 25 years left for the 100th anniversary. And I want to make 2 points in that context. First, he reminded us of the 25 years before 1947, that in 1922, I think this was after the First World War, the expectation was that the British Empire would last 1,000 years. And in 25 years, it was gone. And so it is that image of how much can be achieved in 25 years that he outlined in that speech. Let me also say that the same speech, which is worth going back to, it's been repeated again, talked about a Viksit Bharat as a modern society, not particularly or just a modern economy. A modern economy is essential, and all I'm going to be talking about in my remarks is the economy. But the goal is to bring or to allow Indians to enjoy the fruits of a modern society, which include a lot else other than just economic benefits. The relevance of this and why I was keen to take to accept your invitation is that you are the generation to deliver Viksit Bharat and to enjoy Viksit Bharat. So, old fogies like me, we have a role to play, but an opportunity to engage and interact with you in one of my favorite cities of the country, Hyderabad, was something that I did not want to pass by. And let me also say that I've been a visitor to Hyderabad now, I would think, since about 1980, because when I was at the World Bank, I was in the kind of capacity building side of the World Bank, and we worked closely with the administrative staff college to deliver courses for not just Indian but South Asian civil servants at ASCII. And so I can remember the Hyderabad of 1981, 82, something like that. And I can also remember coming to the Indian School of Business as it was founded, and there was just a little sort of sign somewhere that said high-tech city, and it seemed rather ambitious at the time. I came back when the convention center was inaugurated by the Asian Development Bank annual meetings in, I think, 2006. And so it is my privilege to see how this city has evolved, how much change India is capable of, and that was another reason for accepting the invitation. The final reason was because actually it's relatively unusual to be asked to talk about macro. People tend to think of development as being about human capital, about investment, about productivity, and it is all of those things. And indeed, my address will start with that. But I would argue that much of India's long-term success, and we are a long-term success, as I hope to share with you, and many of you know because you are economic students, is because of sound economic management, sound macro management. And indeed, what brought me to the Administrative Staff College was a course on national economic management. And so my submission is that the macro challenges and macro opportunities that lie ahead of us are complex, perhaps not more complex than we've already transcended, but for those of you who are looking for thesis topics, maybe in the Q&A, it might give you a framework within which to think of the more detailed work you will be doing. So here goes. India's macro challenge, generating and financing a big investment push that will come later. Okay. So I start with remarks of the Honorable Prime Minister on, again, economic, that Viksit Bharat, growth, these are means to an end. They're not an end in themselves. But I can say, because it's one of my privileges to, in a sense, see him in so many contexts, that what this passage indicates is very much how he thinks. Without inclusion, real growth is not possible. And this is quite important, the goal of inclusion cannot be achieved without growth. And I think that's very important because, if you like, a definition of socialism is that inclusion, deserves priority over growth. And I think I'm right in saying that economic growth as an ambition, as a value, is relatively recent. We were much more concerned about equity. So I think the focus on growth is something that, frankly, and I'm not being biased here, is due to, as it were, the 10 or 11 years of the UPA government. And so he goes on to say, we have adopted the paths of growth through inclusivity by trying to include everybody. And here I want to put in an advertisement, what the Americans call a plug, for a recent document that I was closely associated with at NITI Aayog. India has signed up under Prime Minister Modi's leadership to something called the Sustainable Development Goals. How many people here know about the Sustainable Development Goals? Okay, well, I'm pleased about that. So, if India has been very successful in what we call localizing the Sustainable Development Goals, and the process of the Sustainable Development Goals requires us to submit for global examination a voluntary national review every 3 years. And it was my privilege to be at the UN in July to present the voluntary national review. So I would just say that those of you who are development economists or want to see the means by which India has got to where it is today, I would commend you to look at that document, and maybe your library can get a hard copy of it. Okay. So, where are we? As I will show you briefly, India's record on inclusive growth has been impressive. Steep declines in absolute poverty, declining consumption inequality, and resilience to shocks, and that's where macro comes in, have been the hallmarks. But our challenge now is to accelerate growth in what, for the moment, looks like an unpromising global environment. And I would also add there's urgency to it, and the reason for the urgency will become clear in some of my future slides. Now, again, some of you may have come across this as your assigned reading, but the World Bank at the end of 2024 came out with what they call a country economic memorandum where they made their own assessment of what India needed to do in order to become an advanced economy by 2047. And I'll give somewhat more greater precision to that concept in a later slide. But these slides come from them, and they basically are an indication that India's long-term performance, not just the performance, over the last decade, has been pretty impressive because, and this is appropriate for an economy that remains one of, I think it's relatively poor by international standards. It has climbed steadily in the life, since 2012, when we had the so-called taper tantrum, from the 10th largest economy to the 5th largest economy. I made a similar presentation at the World Bank in July, and the chief economist for South Asia, Francisca, she made the point that what is remarkable and the reason for us to have reached 5th largest by 2021, now 4th largest according to the IMF, by the end of the decade 3rd largest, is that we have actually been able to manage and avoid shocks. That really what, in a sense, you don't recover from are financial crises or wars, but I think really. And so part of the importance of thinking about macro is risk management, and I think we've done a pretty good job. And again, the same graphic comes from the same document, and you can see that, and this is pre-COVID, they cut it off at 2019. I don't know whether that was to flatter China or what, but you can see that it's a pretty long-running show. So we are building on success, and that's good. But I would also say that past success doesn't guarantee future success. I don't know how many of you have, in your public finance, come across the writings of Albert Harburger. He, at a conference that I was at with him, offered a very interesting image which has stuck in my mind 20 years. He said, he was talking probably about China or Korea or something. He said, we tend to think of 8% growth or 6% growth as being like a swan gliding smoothly on a lake. What we don't see are the legs kind of paddling furiously beneath the water. And that's what 6% growth is. 6%, even 6% growth, means that things are constantly changing, people are moving, people are investing in themselves. And so yes, there are institutions that keep that going, but you cannot take the past as a guarantee for the future. It needs continuous effort. That's the story on growth, where, as I say, we have done well. This is the story on inclusion, which came out and which has been, disputed hotly in the Indian papers. But this is a consumption-based Gini coefficient. People like to use, depends what the point they're trying to make, top 10%, top 1%. But the World Bank, which does this on a consistent basis, chooses to use a consumption-based Gini, and it has eased from 29 in 1974 to 25.5 in 22, the lowest documented inequality level in India. And I think the important message is the one that the message is what I said before. We should not believe that there has to be a choice or a trade-off between growth and inclusion, or growth and inequality. We've succeeded at both, and we must continue to succeed at both for the reasons, two reasons. The reasons that the Prime Minister mentioned, that it's not sustainable without inclusion, but also that we are trying to do this as the only nation which was created with universal suffrage. And one of the delights to me of my job at NITI Aayog is to see the majesty of Indian democracy at our governing council, where all the chief ministers are present. And these are very shrewd, subtle, sophisticated policy practitioners. And you go and talk to them, and inclusion actually is the first. They want growth, but inclusion is what gets them re-elected. So it's not a surprise that our political economy has delivered inclusive growth, but we can't rest on our laurels. So now, where are we at this moment? First, there's a lot. I won't go through all these numbers. First, there is a lot of talk about jobless growth, employment. Again, statistics claim to be objective, but they are deeply political. But you can just see that in the sidebar that there are certain surprising, striking things. First, there has been a big increase, and I'll spend quite a bit of time on this, in the labor force participation rate of women. So what we have here are two blocks. One that divides up the growth in the workforce, which by those people who are actively seeking work, but including the unemployed. And basically the workforce has been increasing at about 5%. It remains the case, and this is something I'll come back to, is that the share of the workforce in agriculture and so-called allied sectors has actually gone up rather than the expectation that it would go down. Second, that that the growth in female workers across the sectors has actually been remarkably high, which is, I don't know if I have a pointer, but it's basically the annual growth. So we have the growth of women employment in agriculture growing at 15% a year, and I'll be, okay, this is pointer, but where do I have to point that? Okay, I shan't bother. Okay. Anyway, this is all still the warm-up, and I'm 20 minutes into the presentation, so let me keep going more quickly. Okay, yeah. Okay, I think this is an amplification. The reason I will spend time on the female labor force participation ratio is this is going to be key for India's future growth, because the largest reservoir of labor is women who are in the employable age but who have not chosen to enter the labor force for all kinds of sociological and other reasons. What we know is that aggregate employment, the earlier chart, increased by 150 million. Of this, 80 million women entered agricultural work. 40 million of those are unpaid family workers, but who are seen as contributing to the household as an economic enterprise. So these are enormous numbers over a fairly short period of time, and they are a sign of a sign of some optimism. And let me also note that one of the big improvements has been in the quality of the labor force data. But let me move on. I won't spend more time on female labor force. We'll perhaps come back to that in the questions and answers. Yeah. Okay, so I've started from what the employment and labor picture is for two reasons. Ultimately, growth is important, or equitable growth depends on good jobs. And that has been true in the past. It's going to be even truer for your generation. And there are all kinds of uncertainties, both positive and negative, about what the future of work is going to be. AI, technology, in one of India's big technological hubs. Let me, though, then talk about growth in the more conventional way, which is sectors. And here what you would see is that actually the there's been relatively little change in the share of manufacturing in gross value added, although the story in terms of productivity is what you would expect, and the two are two sides of the same coin, that manufacturing productivity has been rising faster than any other sector. And you can understand how these two are related. If productivity rises, it means that fewer hands are needed to do the same work. And so it's not surprising that the share of the labor force in manufacturing has been stagnant. But let me make the point that this is not only an Indian phenomenon, that in terms of employment, not in terms of value added, in terms of employment, the onset of so-called deindustrialization is taking place much sooner. And I won't elaborate the point right now, but the point I wanted to make is I think we have and should have a goal to raise the share of manufacturing in value added, but that may or may not be the same as raising the share of manufacturing in employment. You may be wondering, and you're right to wonder, what any of this has to do to macro. I promise you I'll get there. But let me just test with the audience, since you're economists, is this sort of interesting? Is this stuff you know already from your courses? So just some feedback. Is this at least intelligible to you, would you say? Okay, fine. If you'd said no, I would quit at this time. But anyway, right. Okay, so now let's move on. Sorry, do you want to say something? No, okay. Just to make sure I don't faint. Right. Okay, so I'm still on the sectors business, and so I think what I want to impress on you is that India, as 1/6 of humanity, will write and has written its own rules. We tend to think that there's a stylized template coming from East Asia, coming from China, coming from from ASEAN. I think one of the things that I've had to do in preparing this presentation and thinking about what our strategy for Viksit Bharat would be is, let's see India for what it is rather than as against some external template. Those of you who do development economics would perhaps know the work of Sir Arthur Lewis and the Lewis model, which talked about the transfer of labor from low productivity agriculture to manufacturing. I was privileged to not to be taught by Sir Arthur, but to work with him because he was on the faculty at Princeton, which is where I was. The point I think that becomes relevant for India and will be relevant for the macro also in a short while is that we have tremendous diversity across states, but also that our agriculture has been doing surprisingly well. And so as we think about the future, the next 25 years, the next 10 years, I very much want you not to think of agriculture as a sunset sector, but as a sunrise sector. And I just wanted to know, are there people here who are taking a course in agricultural economics? Is that a standard part of the curriculum here? Yes, it is. Okay, fine. So just to say that, take it seriously. And this comes back to the point that I just made. Should we consider India to be atypical, an outlier, or do we need to accept that where we are in manufacturing, where we are in services, where we are with the share of employment in agriculture, that these are structural features, slow-moving features of the Indian economy? This repeats many of the points that I've made already. Let me just leave it at that. Okay. Finally, I've already mentioned that there is huge diversity in the performance of states. I think it was not mentioned in the review of my experience in CV that for 4 years I lived in Europe as the chief economist of Royal Dutch Shell. At that time it was headquartered in the capital of the Netherlands, The Hague. They have since relocated to London. And I was also associated with a think tank in Brussels, which, as you know, is the seat of the European Commission. And so that gave me a flavor of how Europeans think about the EU. And increasingly, I tend to think of our states in a similar way. I mean, the development strategy that's appropriate for Tamil Nadu and the development strategy that's appropriate for Bihar or UP will necessarily be very different. And so it is the case that there has been divergence, and that's something we need to worry about. As you see, high-income states account for 26% of the population, but 44% of GDP, while low-income states have 38% of the population, only 19% of the GDP. But I do want to bring to the Indian context the point that I made in a global context, that in principle, the further behind you are, the faster you can grow. And it has also been the case that some of the so-called Bimaru states, I'm thinking of Rajasthan, for example, Madhya Pradesh, are actually doing pretty well. So there's no reason to think that individual states are destined to lag forever. It may well be the case that the dispersion across states would change even as the composition changes. A case in point, which I'm upset about because I'm a Punjabi, is that Punjab has systematically gone down the league tables. It was, I think, the most affluent state for a while, and now I think it's some number 9, even though its resource endowment remains what it always has. And that does indicate how important leadership and policy are. Okay, there is one point which I want to make in the last bullet point. So there's a big debate going on in Europe about a single market, completing the single market. I would argue that many of the sources of higher growth in India will come from completing our own internal market. A very important step towards that was the introduction of the Goods and Services Tax in 2013, which, as you know, has just been cleaned up. But I think that we are going to need the kind of labor mobility that in the old days the US has enjoyed. That's a complicated issue because, there is, I think, including in this state, an inclination to reserve certain jobs for homeborn people. But just to say that if we are to benefit from our giant market, we need to be better integrated. Okay. Now we go to what you're here to really hear about, which is the future. We are aiming to be a modern society, but in order for that to be refracted or to have an implication for our economic strategy, we need to know what that means in terms of our economic goals. And there are various ways that you could approach this. A way that we in NITI and to some extent the Finance Ministry have chosen to do is to use World Bank benchmarks. So the World Bank, for operational reasons, distinguishes between low-income countries, which is what we used to be when I was at the World Bank up till 2000. And if you're a low-income country, you qualify for cheap loans, what's called IDA, the International Development Association window, and those are close to being grants. We've since been paying those back, and so our IDA repayments, as they're called, are an important source of funding for countries in Africa. So that's the low-income threshold. That's the low-income threshold, yes. Then we come to a status called lower middle income, and that's where we are right now. By these metrics, around about $3,000 GNI per capita, GNI being gross national income per capita, and this is at market exchange rates, not at purchasing power parity. And our current aspiration is to get to the upper middle income status, which is $4,500 at today's prices. They keep changing it because prices change. And to give you an example, Indonesia now is a upper middle income country. I think it's fair to say that most of the original Southeast Asian countries, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, and of course Singapore, which is a rich country by now, are in the upper middle income category. Brazil also is in the upper middle income category, as is Mexico. But the glittering prize is to become high income. And that's what we're aiming for, to become a high income country by 2047. And one number you may have heard is that would be a nominal GDP, size of GDP of $30 trillion compared to the $4 trillion. So we want, in current prices, our per capita income to go up by 7 times. Now, the curves here are 5%, 7%, 10%, and they indicate the number of years to reach middle income status, starting from to reach upper middle income status, yes. So if we could attain 10%, by the way, what is the number in your heads at the moment? What is the rate at which, the annual rate of growth of the Indian economy at the moment? Any guesses? Okay, that's quarter to quarter. Yeah, but 6.5 is not a bad assumption. And so what this is trying to motivate is that if we want to reach upper middle income status in the next decade, then we need to raise our average compound growth rate to 8.5 years. But there's a trick in that if you take this out all the way to 2047, because if you like, the poorer you are, the faster it is for you, easier it is for you to grow fast, which means that as with China today, you will necessarily start to decelerate the more affluent you become. And that's what creates this sense of urgency now. That the moment is now, even though the world is in turmoil, because if we can, as it were, put this 7% under our belt in the next decade, reach upper middle income by 2035, knowing that after that we will probably slow down, it makes it more likely that we will get to the desired 14,000 by 2047. So therefore, the rest of the presentation is how to become an advanced society by 2047, which requires, again, I don't want to get hung up on the numbers, but it's higher than what we are, and to maintain 7.6 compound average growth rate for 24 years means you're going to have to do better than that now. So you want to go from your 6 or whatever to something like 8 over the next decade. And so what that looks like and what role macro has to play, those are going to be the subject of my final slides. Now, if you go back to the title, I talked about a big investment push. India actually does not do too badly compared with Latin America that I worked on for almost 2 decades. But it's not a super investor. Now, you can overdo things. I mean, China, I think, has wasted its investment, including in real estate, etc. But a formulation that many people have accepted, including the IMF, is that compared to our investment rate, and since you are economists, you know that investment has 2 components, gross fixed capital formation, but also change in inventories. And so, we need to be precise and say that what we're talking about is the gross fixed capital formation piece of it, that we want to raise that from, let's say, 30% of GDP or 29% of GDP, which is where we are, by another 2 to 2.5% of GDP and sustain that maybe for the next decade. And this has 2 dimensions to it. Those of you who follow the current news know that while the government has been doing a lot of investment, there's still concern that the private sector is not choosing to invest, and we need to examine that, although I spend less time on that. But secondly, and that's where macro comes in, is really how to think about the financing of that extra 2.5. And I should say that this is not something India has not seen in the past. In the high growth years of the 2000s, when China was the big locomotive of global growth, our investment rate did rise and our savings rate also rose, as did our current account deficit. So we need to, as it were, create the same animal spirits and the financing that we enjoyed at that time. Okay, so that, let me also though say that on the real side, where the investment, amongst other things, is designed to raise our average labor productivity, because you don't get increases, sustainable increases in real wages without increases in labor productivity. Those of you who, know growth theory know that there's also a concept of total factor productivity, but here I'm talking about real productivity. And you can see that our labor productivity which has gone up which is good, from 6 to 8, is still well below the labor productivity of, for example, our BRICS colleagues. So that also is an important part of the agenda going forward. So let me now come to what I promised: macro management and structural transitions. The first point is that we are talking of at least 3 transitions, maybe more, 4, in the next 20 years. A demographic transition that I'll talk about in a minute, urbanization, and an energy transition, and a climate transition, and they're not quite the same. And focusing on the financial side, we need to align fiscal, monetary, and external balance of payments policies. We need to create a financial intermediation to provide long-term funding for several areas: infrastructure, renewables, and tech, harness our demographic dividend, and because urbanization is what's expensive, we particularly need to focus on urban finance, housing finance, and the financing of transit systems. Could the organizers give me a time check? I know we started a little late. Do I have another 10 minutes or so? Yeah. Okay, thanks. And then I would like to take a few questions. So this is not terribly legible for people at the back, but what this does is compare. The red slide is China, the blue slide is India, and the solid is observed, and the dotted is projected. And I'll summarize this in text in a minute, but you can see that the shape of our demographic transition is less abrupt because we did not have a one-child policy. China did, than that of China. That's good news. And that then presents itself or reflects itself in an important variable called the total dependency ratio, which is the working population relative to, as it were, who they are supporting, both in terms of children and increasingly in terms of the aged. And these are the key differences between China's demographic window opened earlier, peaked higher, and closed sooner. India's opens later, peaks a bit lower, but remains wide through mid-century. And so the implications, this links up with the point I was making about the golden decade when all of you will be in the workforce. This golden decade of 25 to 35 is going to be the golden decade for our demographic dividend. And at the end of the day, growth has a lot to do with the increase in the hands available. Indeed, the simplest way of thinking about growth is more workers at a higher level of productivity. And as you've already gathered, the workers are going to be the women in the agricultural sector, and reform is what is going to produce higher labor productivity and better wages. Okay? Finally, now, so all of this is what the economists would talk about, the real side of the economy. So where does finance come in? And I think in terms of what we could call demand-side economics, we tend to separate fiscal policy and monetary policy. We allocate to the central bank, and I think you had a session on inflation targeting, and so the idea is to avoid what's called fiscal dominance. But here I'm going to talk about the need for fiscal and financial to work together to finance the big investment push. So these are what one could call seminal challenges for the next 10 years. Investment and financial resource mobilization, balancing domestic savings and current account deficits is vital to support increased investments. And I was in a discussion with some of my European colleagues, and I said they are very keen that India invest a lot in green technology, in greening the economy. And I said, look, our rule of thumb is it becomes dangerous if our current account deficit goes above 2%. And I assume, since this is a macro lecture, everybody here knows that the current account deficit is nothing other than the difference between the savings rate and the current account deficit as a ratio of GDP is no different, is equal to, by construction through the national accounts, the difference between saving and investment. And so if you want to raise the investment rate, either you agree to a higher current account deficit, which could be risky, or you've got to raise domestic savings. Okay? And second, I'll talk about the link between fiscal and monetary balance in a minute. Okay. But there's also the issue that, already our financial system is one of the larger financial systems in the world, and it's going to grow even larger. And so the question of opening our financial system further, what's sometimes called capital account liberalization, is also a set of decisions we have to take. Let me say that I'm not an absolutist on this, because indeed Europe opened its capital account after the Bretton Woods system collapsed as recently as the early 80s, when all of the European countries were much more affluent than us. And we have seen in Latin America, East Asia, that there are risks of opening the capital account, but there are gains as well. And a couple of other issues which we can come back into the question is public debt management, which is very important, and also maintaining your own safety net in the form of foreign exchange reserves, and how much to intervene in foreign exchange markets. Okay, if those are the broad challenges that face us, what should we be thinking about in terms of the financial architecture? And let me just say that in a conference that discussed these matters at the Indira Gandhi Institute last December, I became aware that India is rather fascinatingly poised between having a choice between a US-type capital market-based system, which, as you know, is very good for risk capital, and a European-type banking system. Up till now, we've largely been a banking system, but because our capital markets have grown very fast under sound regulation on the whole, we actually now have to think as strategists about what mix of capital market and banking we should be aiming for and why. And the issue of inclusion is very important in this, because you know that our banking system does not support our small and medium enterprises to the extent that we would wish them to do so. Whether our equity markets would do a better job, and some people are arguing that we should be looking to the equity markets. You know that in the US, the junk bond market, which was invented about 30 years ago, has provided non-investment grade finance to startups, etc. So here is a set of financial architecture design issues that I think essentially the relevant institutions. You've got IRDA here based in Hyderabad, you've got the Reserve Bank based in Bombay, you have the PFRDA based in Delhi, you've got SEBI in Bombay. So all of these people will do what they need to do for their institution. But what I'm arguing is that there is a need for the academic community, the policy community, to take an aggregate view of how we want to proceed in the next 10 years on banks versus capital markets, NBFCs, non-bank financial companies, which have been in the shadows but have been very important for transport finance, etc. And particularly, I think, in the south, in Tamil Nadu and also in Andhra, Telangana. Okay, now one point, which is that we can only run a current account deficit to the extent that foreign financing is available. But there is skepticism on how quickly foreign funding will be available. And therefore, the argument is that the focus should be on mobilizing domestic savings and developing active and liquid corporate bond markets. This is one area where there's a lot of lip service, but not much has happened. But also, you would have noticed that with the arrival of well-developed mortgage markets, households are putting less of their savings into financial assets, what are called financial savings, and are choosing to put them into physical assets. And so, if we wish to, as it were, finance public goods, then we're going to have to develop instruments that bring the household savings back to financial instruments, to financial intermediation. And that's the point about reorienting physical savings to financial savings. Okay, just to say that some of the stuff may be on the NITI website. These are some directions in which researchers like you, practitioners, need to be thinking about aspects of the financial architecture, about our external engagement, and the fiscal dimensions of an investment push. And fiscal policy has many dimensions. It's not only about containing the deficit, it's about improving the spending, the efficiency of capital spending, expanding the tax base, asset recycling, strengthening state finances, new fiscal rules to allow borrowing for productive assets. As you know, we operate, our fiscal accounts are entirely on a so-called cash basis, whereas what we really should be doing is accrual accounting. It's not easy. Accrual accounting is also important for thinking about environmental issues, using up natural capital. So there's a vast agenda as we think of our transition from lower middle income to upper middle income. And that's the 10-year agenda. Okay, so let me, just sum up, and then I don't know whether I myself will do the questions and answers. Somebody will help me, but so India's ambition rests on investment at scale. A strategy must combine macro management, capital openness, financial modernization, and fiscal reform. Growth must be inclusive, resilient, and sustainable. And by 2047, India will be a leading global economic power and will get there on the basis of our distinctive development model and not by copying what others do. I think that's the last slide, so I thank you for your attention. Let me sit there and take the questions from that.
Thank you, Samanberi sir, for your insightful words, and your words have really motivated the student and to deal with the macro challenges regarding the long-term growth, and also gave us a glimpse of the Viksit Bharat vision by 2047. And now I would like to call VC sir to address the session. Will be now addressed by the chair, Professor B.J. Rao sir, Vice Chancellor of University of Hyderabad.
Good afternoon to all of you. It's really a special pleasure to give some remarks soon after Suman Beriji's enthralling talk. Very informative talk, very insightful talk. The goal is very pointed, and that is by 2047, we must hit the high point of Viksit Bharat. By then, me and Beri Saab may not be there to watch it. Doesn't matter. But all of you would be riding the high horse. Provided we do two or things very, very, very well. I want to catch on a few points that Beri Saab mentioned. One big point he mentioned is that agricultural economy is becoming a sweet spot. Actually, that was becoming a bane for some time in the discussions. But now he pointed out that looking at the data, that is becoming a sweeter spot. And that will be the winning point if we do it well. That's number one. Number two, the workforce, labor workforce is increasing, especially the female workforce, which is a good news. Numbers are looking good. They could have been better, but they're certainly looking good. But the bad news is, this is the bad news. Our labor productivity is fairly low, even now. This is where we as educationists come in. In his talk, there were two words which were conspicuously missing. Sorry, I have to say it. One, innovation. Second, education. These two are the twin engines which will take us to the high point. If we don't pay attention to these two engines, which is where all of you come in, we will be struggling. I'm saying this in front of Vice Chairman NITI Aayog. Now we are a pyramid. We have always been a broad base, and then the base tapers to the point. And our base of the pyramid, middle of the pyramid, is the essence of the journey. That's the essence. That part of the pyramid has to be shaken up, has to wake up. If we don't do it, time is running out. If we don't do it in a decade, this decade, 10 years, we might get into that middle income trap, quote unquote. So how do we do it? This is the real question. In fact, this is the only question that is relevant. How do we do such that the base and the middle of the pyramid wakes up and keeps moving fast enough to generate enough wealth for the country so that we become from 4 trillion to maybe at least 15-20 trillion. At least 4 to 5 times. May not be 7 times, at least 4 to 5 times. How do we do it? The only way we do it, this is real. The only way we do it is we educate our masses with high quality education. What do I mean by high quality? Education which translates into skills, productivity. That is high quality, not just piece of papers. That's number one, that we have to do it. That we have to do it at the base of the pyramid and middle of the pyramid. The top of the pyramid will manage anyway. Let's not talk about IITs and NITs. They will manage it anyway. So we have to do that. The time is running out. And then when you do the high quality education and skill, innovation comes in. Innovation is not a separate invention. It is just the state of mind. When you are well educated, when you know what you should do yourself, then innovation is an automatic happening. In terms of quality and skill, we have been far behind our competitors. This is the elephant in the room that we have to address. Can we do it fast enough? When our pyramid is so large, we can do it. There is one way, one recipe that is waiting and knocking on our door. And that is, we use technology very effectively. What do I mean by that? We ensure that our middle and bottom of the pyramid, participants, stakeholders, become self-learners. They should become teacher-independent learners. And technology is available now. AI-driven large language model technology, which we should implement in all local languages fast enough. So that me, as an aspirational learner, I don't have a school, I don't have a teacher, but I have the access to the technology. If I can develop the toolkits, adaptive, interactive learning toolkits, independent of teacher, if I am able to learn on my own, quickly, fast enough, then I think there is a good chance that my education will become my skill will become innovation. And if this starts happening in the hinterland fast enough, the elephant will start running. This may not happen if we only on urban centers, which is our problem. Biology functions as a large model. The success story of a biology is it functions as a modular unit. Every part of my body is a modular unit. We must function as modular systems. Large country, when it functions as modular systems, it doesn't matter. Size is no problem at all. as long as we have efficient modules interconnected and the system moves. Size is no issue these days because of technology. In no technology era, size was an issue. In this day of technology, size is not an issue because we have to make very efficient, functioning, interconnected modular systems. And the base and the middle of the pyramid, when it is interconnected, then we have the modules functioning. For too long, we have focused on few urban centers. Excess heated growth, and we have destroyed the ecosystems there. We should move on to some other model now and look at Bharat as a large spread, develop modular units of growth, more in situ. More in situ growth happens if there is a quality education there, when there are skills there, when there is innovation there. So we need to go for that kind of model, and I'm sure people like Beriji are thinking about it, and I'm sure in the years to come, we will hit the high point, and all of you would be the participants of that high growth, hopefully. And some of us would watch from top down and see this beautiful happening. So thank you very much, Beri Saab, for your quality time and very, very useful, insightful data. But I spoke like an educationist. I don't fully go with the numbers. I go with the process, and we need solutions for the process. I really want to appreciate your time. And I'm sure my young scholars have really learned a lot from your presence here. And I'm sure they will have interesting questions for you so that you can engage with them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, VC sir, for your insightful word, and that really enriched the young minds. Now I would like to say that the floor is open for question. Any question for our speaker, please raise your hand.
Hello. Yes.
So we'll take 3 questions in time. Yes. Please introduce yourself and your question.
My name is Amar. I am from Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. So my question to sir is that, as you know, ex-governor of RBI has argued, shouldn't India make service sector as its engine of growth, rather than manufacturing sector where there is rising protectionism among at the current times. There is rapid automation in the low skill jobs, and also there is global overcapacity.
Thank you. Next question. Okay, please.
Very good afternoon to all of you. My question is that, as we seen, women participation in agriculture is increased, and since agriculture is largely urbanized sector, and also marginal productivity of labor of this sector is very low, can we really say that this is a good sign for our economy? Vijayant Kumar, MA Financial Economics, first semester.
Hello, sir. So firstly, I would like to thank you for taking out time from your busy schedule to attend to our university. And it's truly an honor for all of us to see you and see the presentation. So my question is regarding agricultural sector, to see it as a sunrise sector. Because when we see the Asian tigers, they have skipped the agriculture and they focused on the manufacturing sector, and now we see they are growing at a faster speed. So how can we tap agriculture sector for us to reach the Viksit Bharat goal is my question. My name is Amulya and I'm a PhD scholar here.
Okay, you asked them to be brief. Please make sure I'm brief, okay? Because So let me first, respond to the very piercing and well-considered comments of the Vice Chancellor. So, as it is, it was rather broad-ranging. I would just make 2 points on education and innovation. The first is that's all encapsulated, as you observed yourself, in the need to raise productivity. But the second point, and this really relates more to general reading on economic history, the if institutionalization of innovation in the West is basically 100 years old and started off actually in corporate labs, much more than in government. And in India, I think it's fair to say that government has been doing as much as it can on research and innovation. I think the issue is, why is the private sector not motivated to do so? And what I would say is that there is research out there that suggests that if you want to stimulate R&D, you've got to increase the heat, you've got to increase the protection, the competitiveness. So one could argue that mollycoddling the private sector is one reason we don't have innovation. And I draw a distinction between basic research and innovation, but also that, around the world, Finland, the US, innovation now is being systematized. And we host in NITI Aayog the Atal Innovation Mission, and this comes straight from the insight of the Prime Minister, that what you want to do for rural youth is to give them a sense of a scientific temper. So he's starting absolutely at the beginning, and NITI is part of that. Okay, now, very interesting question. Well, so clearly, both Vice Chancellor and the audience have caught on to the agriculture theme, and I'm pleased about that. It has its ups and its downs, but the notion that because other countries, in a sense, their growth path was driven by manufacturing, does that mean we've missed the bus? Let me just say that the Netherlands, in which I lived, is the world's second largest agricultural exporter. So there is such a thing as high productivity agriculture, and we are the country with the largest arable land in the world. But we need to do 2 things. We need to actually, it is true, we've tended to focus more on land productivity. We need to focus on labor productivity. I think the answer on whether we're condemning women to, drudgery and pointlessness, that's not the point. The point is that reconciling home care responsibilities with being productive is for them at the moment best done in agriculture. And to come back to the point the Vice Chairman of Chancellor made, that technology now is going to allow them, we hope, to contribute to the modern society while physically being rural. And, I think it's important to keep drawing distinctions. So, agriculture is classified often on the basis of where you live rather than the activity. Much of the earnings of agricultural households don't come actually from agriculture. So I would make that that point. And on services versus manufacturing, when you have the difference between a Tamil Nadu and a Bihar, I think having a uniform strategy doesn't make sense. Equally, a uniform strategy for Sweden and Cyprus doesn't make sense. So I think what you need to do is, in a sense, clean up some policies. After all, we didn't will the IT sector into existence. It responded to incentives and, yes, intelligent policy. So I think sweeping generalizations, we're doing well at services. We have a comparative advantage at that. But, even for national security reasons, for us to be completely dependent. And President Trump, I mean, he's saying, why should we be dependent on steel and aluminum, etc.? So we have to aim for balance.
Thank you, sir. We will take next 3 questions. Soumya, I'm just keeping tab of the hands. Soumya first. Soumya Gundu there, and then Pavan, and then Professor Vijay. And we will come again.
Good evening, sir. It's an honor to speak to you. You're my personal source of inspiration. I wanted to ask you if India has zero net carbon emissions goal as per Viksit Bharat 2047. We also know that the effects of climate change are not equal. The major brunt of climate change is borne by poor women especially. So how can we leverage this concept called green bonds, which is the hot topic in global climate negotiations recently? How can we leverage green bonds to finance more inclusive projects in India?
Next, Pavan, I request you, all of you, to be very, very brief in the question. Quickly introduce and...
Thank you, sir, first of all, for your wonderful session. Myself, Pranav. I'm an integrated economics final year student. So my question would be, so I have been working on something regarding health economics where we discuss about the intergenerational effect and the impact of childhood shocks when it comes to the later generation. So my question is, Viksit Bharat 2047 is something that spans across generation. So how can we ensure that the shocks, the childhood shocks that's happening now, or how can we ensure that that doesn't create an unsustainable debt? Or even in the case of for a sustainable future, how can we ensure this sustainability is being maintained while this development is being carried out in this society? Is my question. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Suman Berry, for a very ending with a very positive note. Though you said uncertainties can be both sides. I'm Srijit. I teach here at the School of Economics. You began with the Prime Minister's focus on inclusiveness, and I think you ended up that we need investments, and as Professor Rao also mentioned, it should go with innovation and education. But I think in the story of inclusiveness, when you're bringing into the question of inequality, the measure of Gini actually fails the inclusiveness concept what the Prime Minister had, because Gini is not level sensitive. It fails. It is, if absolute gaps increase, it cannot capture. So that's one question. So we should be, when you're talking about inclusiveness in the frame of what the Honorable Prime Minister said, we should be cautious while referring to Gini. The second thing I think you explicitly mentioned about we need investment, and you talked about the corporate equity. So there, the accounting thing, I think you need to elaborate a bit for our students, because now if more and more population is going to invest in mutual funds and all other financial assets, then the traditional definition of saving will not fit in there. So, but it could help in the growth process, I think. Thank you.
Yes, the climate issue. We did try. So, what is the logic behind green bonds? There's both, if you like, a financial logic, and then there's also what I might call a do-gooder logic, okay? Which is to say that in a world where, if you like, corporates or financial institutions more than corporates felt that they would be rewarded for having a more green asset book, there was an expectation that there would be a slight, there would be some, as it were, benefit to green bonds. I don't know whether that is being realized in practice globally. I do know that India's attempt to market green bonds has not, in that sense, shown substantial kind of differentials or discounts. But your other questions were more about the link between net zero and the impact of climate change. And there, I think it's complicated because a lot of the impact of climate change comes within or the rubric or the bucket of adaptation, whereas most of the negotiations have tended to be, and the net zero target, about what's called mitigation. And, when at the back, not stressed in this presentation, but very much in my mind, is the fact that adaptation, which is dealing with the climate change impact here and now, is going to be an additional demand on state government and central government expenditures, and therefore the investment needs to be, the leadership on investment needs to move away from government, where it's typically been since COVID, to the private sector. And so that's the demand side. I was focusing more on the financing side. Now, Professor's question about, on the intergenerational, before I come to the inequality point, look, I talked about the voluntary national review that I was privileged to present before at the ECOSOC at the UN. And, they have something which is hunger. It's really about hunger, but stunting and wasting are still major issues for India. And there's a lot of research on, as it were, both the intergenerational dimension, stunting and wasting. But actually, my respected colleague, Dr. V.K. Paul, believes that a lot of the issues are more easily fixed in terms of, as it were, instructing mothers in the transition from, as it were, breast milk to, as it were, solid foods. I mean, a lot of, so if you miss that opportunity, then you are locking in intergenerational consequences, because these will not be children who have their full mental capacity. That will have an impact on their children. So, the 0 to 3 period is now really achieving a lot of focus, whereas the Anganwadi system was really at a slightly older age. Finally, I'm not sure that I fully agree. Firstly, I hope I made it clear that what we were talking about is a specific metric of consumption inequality. Okay? Now, I don't know whether you're maintaining that even for consumption inequality, the Gini is, I'd be surprised because that the Gini is not an appropriate metric. But I think the larger question then becomes, and it's a political question as much as it is an economic question, which is there a trade-off between poverty reduction and, as it were, worrying about inequality? And then what kind of inequality? I mean, economists of my training tend to focus on personal and household inequality. But what's politically very important, as I mentioned, is regional inequality. And I think we know a lot less about what normative frame to put on regional inequality. So I may not have answered your question, but I think what we should discuss offline is whether even for consumption inequality, the Gini is, not the right measure. But I think we'll have to leave it at that for now. And back to you.
Thank you, sir. Next set of questions. So many hands. Okay. Should we do the last round, or you would like to? Okay, so we'll go back. I think you have been raising hands. So first one is that there. Okay, so we'll take last 3 questions. Never mind, and then Arpit, and then funny. So I think we will end with that. I'm so sorry about because
Hello.
for us to catch a flight.
Yes, sir. Myself, Meet Lavtuka. I am an economics student, and I will straight come to the point of the question. Like, I want to add on with what Vice Chancellor said that about middle income trap. And if we consider today's point that India's budget for innovation and R&D is still less than 1% of the GDP, and what countries that have escaped the middle income trap have on an average become or have budget at a 2.5% of the GDP. And if we directly rely on private sector and with a time constraint of 22 years to come up at a high level income trap, high level income, then how we are going further? Considering the time frame we have. Thank you.
Very good evening, sir. I am Arpit, pursuing Masters in Financial Economics. Sir, my question is, sir, during the presentation, you mentioned that agriculture is a sweet spot right now. But if we look at the mindset of the farmers, the practitioners of agriculture, they insist their children to go and get a service in the in the urban areas. They say their children not to practice agriculture. They say that if you practice agriculture, you will not be able to have 1 square meal a day. So if we look at their mindset, they seem agriculture as a bitter spot. But we educationists, policy makers, we are considering agriculture as a sweet spot. Sir, so how we are envisioning that? So this is my question.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I'm Professor Ponindra Goyari, teaching here. Yeah. So I think not a question, but a request. When you are publishing this as a policy paper or a research paper, can you please give the subtitle "Financing a Big, Good Quality Investment Push"? Because in line with what our Honorable Vice Chancellor said, not just education, but good quality education. So in our country or in the world, what we need is a good quality investment, not just a big investment or large investment. Even in many growth models, economists are talking about only large investment, big investment. They are not, many are not speaking about good quality investment. Yes.
Sir, my name is Rajesh Palya. I am a research scholar in School of Economics. So I want to touch upon one of the 4 focused area, that is urbanization. As India will be more than 50% urbanized in 2047. We can see that today our cities and towns, they are underfunded, low on autonomy, they have low responsibility, even lower accountability. One monsoon crack upon our smart city dreams. So I'm asking, how is the government going to address the urban decay?
Look, you've given me the best reward I could have wanted, which is to have absorbed, to have reacted to what I had to say, and that alone has made this interaction important and valuable for me. So thank you all for that, for your attention, for the show of hands. This is why I need to get out of Delhi much more often than I do. On the middle income trap, 2 or 3 observations. And maybe I can link this up with the question of high quality. It so happens that it was my cohort at the World Bank, good friends of mine, one of Pakistani origin, Homi Kharas, one of Indian origin, Indermeet Gill, who came up with the concept of the middle income trap, which is, is controversial. It's not universally accepted. But in conversation with them, I've not gone back to the original source, and Homi in particular, in conversations I've had with him, says, look, this is much more about span of control than it is about R&D. And what does he mean by that? And where is India in that journey? So there is, if you like, a period of primitive accumulation when and Arthur Lewis in The Theory of Economic Growth talked about the fundamental problem of development as being to raise the investment rate. Okay? And frankly, India and many other developing countries, that first stage, they have succeeded in doing. But then the question becomes, okay, I mean, because if you're raising the investment rate, you are at the same time raising the saving rate, and the saving rate means that you are depriving people of consumption, poor people of consumption. And frankly, this is what the political system of China permitted. It permitted, as it were, the repression of consumption because of their particular political system. Our system does not permit that. And so, indeed, the efficiency of investment becomes almost a sacred duty. If you are depriving, or if you are taxing, or whatever, if it's different. If you are depriving people of consumption, then if it's not jam today, there better had been jam tomorrow. And jam tomorrow is what reform is meant to be about, which is to say that jam tomorrow means make sure that you have enough pressure so that those who are doing the investing, aim for high productivity. And I will say, and I don't know if this is in the public record, the question of whether our PSU sector is well set up for efficiency, because they do utilize a lot of national savings, is a question. I don't want to be dogmatic about it. So I look at the ICO, and India's incremental capital output ratio so far seems to indicate that we're not doing badly in investment allocation. We come now to the author of The Middle Income Trap, Indermeet Gill, who's now the chief economist of the World Bank, and his latest World Development Report is on the middle income trap. And he's arguing that at a certain stage, you need to move from investment to the diffusion of technology, what the Vice Chancellor was talking about. The question for me is, are we at that stage yet? Or, as the formulation of my talk would have indicated, we still need a big investment push and until we get to upper middle income, because you hit the middle income trap in between upper middle income and advanced. I would argue that in the transition from lower middle income to upper middle income, you can still focus on investment, but I agree, productive investment. And finally, again, did I mention this already? So I think it was a lecture that Arthur Lewis gave at Princeton, he made the point. He said, it is not industrialization that's expensive, it is urbanization. So we have three urban challenges: sustainability, greenness, investment, and governance, because we don't have a system of elected mayors. Cities at the moment are the orphans of the political system. And the question of how, as it were, getting real efficient city managers, after all, in China, virtually all the Politburo, in France, all of them cut their teeth in cities. We don't have that. We have IAS officers who are commissioners. That is a huge change, but there's enough discussion and debate that if we could achieve that in the next 10 years, I think that would be a breakthrough. Again, my thanks to, because I won't give the vote of thanks, my vote of thanks is to the university and to all of you, and let me hand it back.
Thank you, audiences, for your wonderful question and making the session more interactive. And also thank you, Suman Berry sir, for clarifying the doubt of the audiences. And before we conclude the event now, I would like to start that we are going to start the felicitation ceremony. So first, I would like to request our VC sir, BJ Rao sir, to please come and felicitate our chief guest, Suman Berry sir, Chairman of Honorable Vice Chairman of NITI Aayog. Next, I would like to request our Dean Devasys Acharya sir to please felicitate our respected Honorable Vice Chancellor BJ Rao sir. Next, Krishna Reddy sir is requested to felicitate our Honorable Dean sir. So, also, I would like to request Akash Leena-Di to felicitate our faculty coordinator of the event, Krishna Reddy sir. Now I would like to request all the faculty member and the professor to come on the stage, come on the dais and have a group picture. Group picture with our honorable chief guest of the event, Suman Berry sir.
I also have a small announcement. After this program, we have a documentary on carbon nation. So please, after the program also, please be wait. By Sustainable Sparks, there is a club which will be documentary after this event. Thank you.